According to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, there are more than 1 million workers in Australia who are independent contractors. More than half of those are able to subcontract their work, and just over 1/3 are under the total control of their principals. Hiring your workers in the wrong way may land you in a lot of hot waters. More on that in a minute. Hi Alan.
Hey Taki.
How are you?
Very well, how are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Excellent.
That's good. So some of our clients have been expanding and hiring contractors. Is there anything they should be aware of?
Well, I'm glad you asked. Now, contractors are a great resource to a growing business as they provide a certain level of flexibility. However, there are a number of key factors that you should take into account when you're hiring a worker. One of the key considerations is whether the worker is actually treated for tax purposes as your employees. Now, we're talking about for income tax and we're talking about superannuation purposes. Now, this is important because if they were treated as an employees, then the principal will be liable to pay pay-as-you-go withholding and superannuation contributions. Now, let's start with a couple of more recent straightforward cases. The first one is Probin's case, where a property maintenance worker was held to be an employee for SG purposes. Now, in this particular case, a worker, although he had to actually use his own tools and vehicle to attend to jobs, the worker was assigned tasks each day by the principal. The worker could not delegate any tasks and was paid a fixed hourly rate, which it did not actually vary depending on the task. Now, the second case is a Toowong Pasture Pty Limited. In that case, the worker provided services as part of the building renovation business. Now, here the key for consideration includes the workers not maintaining any payment systems for financial records. There was no risk taken on behalf of the worker, and there were workers' compensation provided, and all the work was also provided personally by the worker, and there was no promotion from the workers' business perspective to the public.
So these cases sound pretty straightforward.
Yeah, what they do. Now, one can see how these cases ticked all the right boxes for the worker to be deemed as a super guaranteed employee, and the principal therefore liable for super contributions plus penalties. Now, the ATO has a pretty good tool, employee versus contractor tool, that could give you a pretty good feel of whether a contractor would be deemed as an employee. Now, I'll put the link below so that you can actually have a look at it. Now, that said though, in some circumstances, the arrangement is a little bit less than straightforward. Now, for example, there's a high-profile case called FCT versus Scone Race Club Limited and the Racing Queensland Board. This case concerns the arrangement between certain jockeys, the racing club, the racing board, and also the owners. And the decision was somewhat flip-flopped between the tribunal, the federal court, and then the full federal court. Now, previously, when the federal court decided the case, it was held that jockeys were not the employees of the horse racing clubs and the state racing board for SG purposes. Now, the commissioner then appealed to the full federal court, and the full federal court ruled in favour of the commissioner. In arriving at that decision, the full federal court re-examined the way in which the contract were actually drafted between the owner, the club, the board, and also the jockey. Now, and also they look at how the payments were made, and at the end of the day, it held to be super guaranteed employees. Now, this case is unique to the fact, but in real life, every case is a little bit different. What is clear from this case to look at in terms of the engagement is that you need to look at every situations carefully, look at how the payment methods are actually constructed to make sure that the SG obligation exists or it doesn't. If in doubt, talk to your tax advisor.
Oh, that's useful advice. Any final tips?
Well, two other things worth mentioning. Number one, if for whatever reason the employer thinks it may have short-paid SG between 1 July 1992 and 24th May 2018, the ATO's super contribution amnesty period is still available. It removed the SG charge and making the backdated contributions tax deductible. Definitely worth thinking. Now, the second thing is that the issue of whether the payment to a worker is considered wages has a wider impact. For example, if the payment is considered as wages, then the payment itself may attract payroll tax liability and also impact on workers' compensation premium calculation. Now, this is a totally different things compared to SG and pay-as-you-go withholding. Payroll tax and workers' compensation are state-based legislation, and the application is a lot wider, so be a little bit careful.
Thank you, Alan, for great tips, and I'm sure it will be useful for a lot of the viewers.
It's a pleasure.
So tell us, what are your most important issues when you hiring a worker, by leaving the comments below.
And see you in the next video.